The combat theory classroom buzzed with the usual mix of alien voices as students filed in for morning instruction. Rachel Moore slipped into her seat near the middle row, her regulation uniform crisp and perfectly pressed. Around her, cadets from a dozen different worlds settled into their places. The Vortians clicked their mandibles in quiet conversation. The Telkari hummed in their harmonic language. A few other humans scattered throughout the room exchanged tired nods. Instructor Throck entered with his typical heavy footfalls that made the floor vibrate. He was massive even by Crothan standards, standing nearly 8 feet tall with broad shoulders and arms as thick as tree trunks. His scaled skin was a deep purple that caught the light, and his 4 eyes swept across the classroom with barely concealed contempt. He had made no secret of his views on certain species during the semester. Today we analyzed the Kardak's mission failure, Throck announced, his voice a rumbling bass that needed no amplification. A perfect example of what happens when weak species are given command positions they cannot handle. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a tactical scenario in 3 dimensions. Rachel watched carefully as Throck walked through the mission step by step. A supply convoy had been ambushed in a canyon system. The commander had ordered a direct frontal defense, which led to 60% casualties before reinforcements arrived. The commander froze, Throck declared with satisfaction. Typical of species with slow neural processing. In combat, hesitation means death. This is why the warrior races must lead. We do not hesitate. We do not doubt. We act. Rachel studied the scenario again, her eyes tracing the canyon walls and approach vectors. Something about the analysis felt incomplete. The commander had made a mistake, yes, but not the one Throck was describing. The convoy had 3 options in this terrain, Throck continued, gesturing at the hologram with one clawed hand. Stand and fight, retreat through the kill zone, or surrender. The commander chose poorly and stood ground without proper defensive positions. Weakness led to failure. Rachel raised her hand slowly. A few students nearby glanced at her with what might have been concern or curiosity. Finn Cooper, another human cadet 3 rows back, shook his head slightly in warning. Rachel ignored him. Cadet Moore, Throck acknowledged, his tone making her name sound like an insult. Instructor, the commander actually had a 4th option that wasn't utilized, Rachel said calmly. The canyon system shown here has multiple side passages. 3 of them lead to elevated positions that would have provided cover and a height advantage. Moving 20% of the force to those positions while maintaining the main defense would have allowed crossfire on the ambush points. The classroom went quiet. Several alien cadets turned to look at the hologram again, their various eyes widening as they traced the paths Rachel described. She was right. The passages were there in the terrain map, marked but apparently overlooked in the original analysis. Throck's scales darkened slightly, a sign of rising anger in his species. Those passages were too narrow for efficient troop movement, he said. 4 Crothan troops, yes sir, Rachel replied, keeping her voice level and respectful. But the convoy was mixed species, including several that were smaller and more agile. A Telkari squad could have reached the highest position in under 2 minutes. The tactical advantage would have been significant. A few students nodded. One of the Telkari cadets made a sound that translated as agreement. Drex, a senior Vortian student known for his tactical skills, leaned forward with interest. Throck's 4 eyes fixed on Rachel with an intensity that made the temperature in the room seem to drop. He moved toward her desk with deliberate, heavy steps. Other students instinctively leaned away from his path. You dare to correct my analysis, Throck said, his voice low and dangerous. You, a human? Your species has been in space for barely 2 generations. My people have been warriors for 10,000 years. We have conquered 17 star systems through strength and decisive action. And you think you know better than me? Rachel met his gaze steadily. I'm not questioning your experience, sir. I'm presenting an alternative tactical approach based on the terrain and available forces. The mission brief shows mixed species composition, which creates different options than a single species force would have. Several students held their breath. No one spoke to Throck this way, especially not a first-year cadet. His teaching methods were legendary, as was his temper. He had once made a Vortian cadet do combat drills for 6 hours straight for asking what he considered a stupid question. Different options, Throck repeated, his voice dripping with mockery. He stopped directly in front of Rachel's desk, towering over her. Humans always think they're clever. Always analyzing, always questioning. You know why your species will never be true warriors? You think too much. You hesitate. You doubt. In real combat, those weaknesses get you killed. Respectful disagreement isn't weakness, sir, Rachel said quietly. It's how we improve tactics and save lives. Something snapped in Throck's expression. Perhaps it was the continued calm in Rachel's voice. Perhaps it was the way several other students seemed to be considering her words. Perhaps it was simply that his pride could not tolerate further challenge from what he considered an inferior species. His hand moved faster than most of the class could follow. The slap connected with Rachel's left cheek with a sharp crack that echoed off the classroom walls like a gunshot. Her head snapped to the right from the impact and several students gasped. One of the Telkari let out a shocked whistle. That is how Crothan teach respect, Throck announced to the frozen classroom. Physical correction for those who forget their place. Perhaps now you will learn to keep your mouth shut when your superiors are speaking. 4-3 heartbeats, no one moved. Rachel's head remained turned to the side, her dark hair partially obscuring her face. A bright red mark blazed across her cheek in the perfect outline of Throck's massive hand. Then slowly, very slowly, Rachel rotated her head back to face forward. She didn't touch her injured cheek. She didn't cry out or show pain. Her expression was completely calm, but her eyes had changed. They held a focus that was utterly predatory, like a hunting cat that had just spotted prey. Finn Cooper recognized that look and tensed in his seat. He had seen Rachel in hand-to-hand training. He knew what was coming. Throck saw it too, though he misread it. He leaned down closer to her desk, a sneer on his alien features. Do you have something to say now, Cadet? Rachel's voice was soft, almost gentle. Yes, sir. You just made a serious mistake. The words hung in the air for exactly half a second. Then Rachel moved. Her body uncoiled from the seated position like a compressed spring releasing. Most of the alien students would later swear they never saw her stand up. One moment she was sitting at her desk with that red handprint blazing on her cheek. The next moment she was on her feet with her right fist already in motion. The strike came from low and traveled upward in a perfect arc. Rachel's knuckles connected with the underside of Throck's jaw with a sound like a hammer hitting meat. His head snapped back violently, all four eyes rolling up to show white. His massive body, which had seemed so imposing seconds before, went completely limp. Throck fell like a demolished building. 8 feet and 400 pounds of Crothan warrior crashed to the floor face first with a boom that shook the desks. He didn't try to catch himself. He didn't move at all. He simply dropped, unconscious before he hit the ground. The entire sequence from Rachel's warning to Throck's collapse took less than 2 seconds. The classroom erupted into chaos. A Telkari cadet shrieked in alarm. 2 Vortians jumped out of their seats, mandibles clicking rapidly in distress. A blue-skinned Rendari student knocked over a chair, scrambling backward. Finn Cooper was already on his feet, his hand moving toward the emergency call button on the wall. Rachel stood perfectly still beside Throck's motionless form. She shook out her right hand once, flexing her fingers to check for damage. Her breathing was steady and controlled. The red mark on her cheek stood out starkly against her otherwise calm expression. Someone should call the medical bay, she said quietly, looking down at Throck. He's going to have a concussion when he wakes up. Drex, the senior Vortian student, stared at her with all 6 of his compound eyes. What did you do? His translator made his voice sound strangled. Uppercut to the jaw, Rachel replied simply. Basic strike. The impact rattles the brain inside the skull and causes temporary loss of consciousness. It's a standard defensive technique. Standard? A Telkari student named Krill hovered near the ceiling, her wings buzzing anxiously. You just knocked out Instructor Throck with 1 hit. He struck me first, Rachel said, pointing at her inflamed cheek. Academy regulations allow for self-defense against physical assault regardless of rank. Article 7, Section 3 of the Student Code of Conduct. The classroom door burst open. 2 security officers rushed in, both wearing the gold-trimmed uniforms of Academy peacekeepers. One was Rendari, the other was a species Rachel didn't recognize with gray skin and too many arms. They took in the scene instantly, Throck unconscious on the floor, Rachel standing over him, 30 shocked students pressed against the walls. What happened here? The Rendari officer demanded, his hand on the weapon at his belt. At least 5 students started talking at once. The many-armed officer raised 3 hands for silence. One at a time. You, he pointed at Drex, report. Drex's mandibles trembled. Instructor Throck was lecturing. Cadet Moore offered a tactical analysis. Throck became angry and struck her across the face. Then Moore struck back and Throck fell unconscious. The Rendari officer's blue face darkened with concern. He moved closer to examine Throck, checking his pulse and breathing. He's alive. Unconscious but stable. Medical team is on the way. He turned to Rachel. You did this? Yes, sir, Rachel said calmly. I responded to a physical assault with appropriate defensive force. The entire incident was recorded by the classroom monitoring system. You can review the footage. Appropriate force? The many-armed officer gestured at Throck's massive unconscious form. You knocked out a Crothan instructor. He assaulted a student during class, Rachel countered. I defended myself with a single controlled strike to a non-lethal target. I could have done much worse. I chose not to. Finn Cooper stepped forward carefully. Sir, Rachel is telling the truth. We all saw it. Throck hit her first, hard enough to leave a mark. She only defended herself. Other students began nodding and voicing agreement. A few held up their personal data pads, where they had been recording the lecture. The evidence was overwhelming and clear. 2 medical personnel arrived with a floating stretcher. They worked quickly to load Throck's unconscious body onto it, checking his vital signs with scanning equipment. One of them, an elderly Telcarry with gray wings, looked at Rachel with something like respect. Clean hit, the medic said. Precise targeting. He'll wake up in about 20 minutes with nothing worse than a headache and wounded pride. You showed remarkable restraint, young human. The security officers exchanged glances. The many-armed one spoke into his communication device. Central, this is Officer Crane. We need a full incident review for Classroom 17. Instructor assault on student, student defended. Request immediate command presence. Rachel remained standing in place, her hands now clasped behind her back in a parade rest position. She didn't look smug or angry or scared. She simply looked calm, like someone who had done exactly what needed to be done and was prepared to face whatever consequences followed. The medical team guided Throck's floating stretcher toward the door. As they passed, several students stared at his slack face and limp arms with disbelief. The legendary instructor Throck, terror of first-year cadets, defeated by a human half his size with a single punch. All students remain in your seats, the Rendari officer announced. No one leaves until we collect statements. Cadet Moore, you'll need to come with us for formal questioning. Understood, sir, Rachel said. She walked toward the officers with steady steps. As she passed Finn, he caught her eye and gave a small thumbs up. She didn't smile, but something flickered in her expression. Acknowledgement, maybe. Or perhaps just relief that it was over. At the doorway she paused and looked back at the classroom. Every single student was staring at her. Some with fear. Some with shock. A few with unmistakable admiration. She had just done what none of them had ever imagined possible. For the record, Rachel said to the room, my tactical analysis was still correct. Those side passages would have saved lives. Then she turned and walked out between the 2 security officers, her spine straight and her head high. Behind her, the classroom dissolved into excited chatter in a dozen different languages. The story would spread through the academy within the hour. By dinner time, every cadet and instructor on the station would know that a human student had dropped Instructor Throck with one punch. And every one of them would be wondering what else humans were capable of. The inquiry chamber was circular, with raised seating arranged in tiers around a central platform. Rachel stood on that platform alone, her hands still clasped behind her back. Above her, the academy commandant sat in the highest seat, flanked by senior instructors and administrative officials from 7 different species. The chamber was designed to make the person in the center feel small and exposed. Rachel kept her eyes forward and her breathing steady. Commandant Sela was a Vortian female with silver-streaked mandibles that indicated advanced age and wisdom. Her 6 eyes studied Rachel with an intensity that felt like physical pressure. To her right sat the Academy's head of security. To her left, the chief medical officer who had examined both Rachel and Throck after the incident. Let us begin, Sela announced, her voice carrying easily through the chamber. This inquiry concerns the physical altercation between Instructor Throck and Cadet Rachel Moore. We will review all evidence and testimony before making a determination on appropriate action. A holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber, showing the classroom from 3 different angles. Rachel watched herself on screen, sitting calmly at her desk while Throck lectured. The audio was clear and sharp. Every word of their exchange played out for the assembled officials. Several of the observers leaned forward when the recording reached the moment of Rachel's tactical analysis. Her voice on the replay was respectful but firm. Her points were logical and well presented. A few officials nodded slightly as she spoke. Then came Throck's approach, his escalating anger, his towering presence over her desk. The chamber fell silent as his hand flew out and connected with her face. The crack of impact echoed through the inquiry room. Several officials flinched at the sound. What happened next appeared even faster on screen than it had felt in person. Rachel's body moved in one smooth motion. Her strike was so quick that the recording had to be slowed down to half speed for everyone to see it clearly. Even in slow motion, the technique was flawless. The precision was remarkable. Her fist traveled in a perfect arc and connected exactly where it needed to. Throck's collapse in slow motion looked almost graceful, like a carefully choreographed dance. His eyes rolled back. His legs gave out. His massive body surrendered to gravity and unconsciousness. The recording ended. The hologram faded. Commandant Sela looked down at Rachel with an unreadable expression. "Cadet Moore," she said. "You struck a superior officer." "I defended myself against a physical assault, Commandant," Rachel replied steadily. "Academy regulations clearly state that students have the right to self-defense regardless of the attacker's rank. Article 7, Section 3. Those regulations exist to protect students from attackers with weapons or clear intent to cause serious harm," one of the other officials interjected. He was a Crothan, though smaller than Throck, with darker scales. "Do you claim Instructor Throck was trying to seriously injure you?" "I claim Instructor Throck struck me without warning or justification during class," Rachel said. "I had no way to know if he would strike again or escalate further. I responded with a controlled defensive technique designed to end the threat immediately without causing permanent damage." The medical officer, a Telkari named Vesh, fluttered her wings. "The medical evidence supports this claim. Instructor Throck suffered a mild concussion and minor jaw bruising. He recovered consciousness within 18 minutes and has no lasting injury. The strike was precisely calculated for incapacitation without serious harm." "Precisely calculated," Commandant Sela repeated slowly. "Cadet Moore, your file indicates no formal military combat training prior to academy admission. Yet you displayed technique that even our advanced students struggle to master. Explain." Rachel took a breath. "I began martial arts training at age 6, Commandant. My parents enrolled me in a mixed martial arts program on Earth. I trained consistently for 12 years before coming to the academy. I hold black belt rankings in 3 different Earth combat systems." The chamber buzzed with surprised murmurs. Several officials leaned toward each other in quiet conversation. The Crothan official looked skeptical. "Earth combat systems?" he said dismissively. "Your planet has only recently joined the galactic community. What could your primitive fighting styles possibly teach that matches true warrior training?" Rachel's jaw tightened slightly, but her voice remained calm. "Earth has been home to humans for hundreds of thousands of years, sir. We've been fighting each other and defending ourselves for all of that time. Every culture on our planet developed combat systems, often over thousands of years. Some focus on striking. Some on grappling. Some on weapons. Some on using an opponent's strength against them. We've had a very long time to figure out how to fight effectively despite being relatively weak compared to most galactic species." Commandant Sela's mandibles clicked together in what might have been interest. "You claim humans developed multiple combat systems? How many?" "Hundreds, Commandant," Rachel replied. "Possibly thousands if you count regional variations. Boxing, wrestling, various forms of martial arts from Asia, European fighting styles, African combat systems, weapons training from dozens of cultures. Humans have always been interested in both the practical and philosophical aspects of combat. We study it as both necessity and art." The security chief, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Are you saying that most humans receive combat training?" "Not most, sir, but many. Especially in recent generations, martial arts training has become popular for fitness, discipline, and self-defense. Millions of humans train regularly. It's considered a valuable skill and a way to build character." The officials exchanged more glances. This was clearly information they hadn't expected. A species that trained its civilians in combat techniques as a recreational activity was unusual in galactic society. Most species either had warrior castes or relied purely on military training. Vesh, the medical officer, pulled up additional data on her screen. "I've been reviewing human physiological information. Your species has unusually dense bone structure for your size, significant fast-twitch muscle capability, and remarkable hand-eye coordination. Your ancestors were persistence hunters, yes?" "Yes, ma'am," Rachel confirmed. "We evolved to chase prey over long distances until it collapsed from exhaustion. We're built for endurance and precision rather than raw power." "Which explains the technique," Vesh continued, gesturing at the frozen hologram of Rachel's strike. You cannot overpower a Crothan through strength, so instead you use precise targeting and leverage. The jaw is a weak point on most species. A sharp upward strike creates rotational force that the brain cannot compensate for, resulting in immediate unconsciousness. Simple physics applied with perfect execution. Commandant Sela was quiet for a long moment, all 6 eyes focused on Rachel. Finally she spoke. Cadet Moore, this inquiry has revealed something unexpected. We have humans at this academy, but we know very little about human combat capabilities. Your defensive action against Instructor Throck was legally justified under Academy law. However, the manner in which you executed that defense has raised important questions. Rachel waited, unsure where this was leading. I am ordering a special demonstration, Sela announced. You will present human combat techniques to the Academy's senior staff and advanced students. You will explain your training methods, demonstrate various techniques, and answer questions about human fighting capabilities. This will be scheduled for 3 days from now in the main training arena. This inquiry is concluded. You are dismissed with no disciplinary action. Rachel blinked in surprise. Of all the outcomes she had imagined, this wasn't one of them. Understood, Commandant. Thank you. As she turned to leave, Commandant Sela added one more thing. And Cadet Moore? Your tactical analysis in class was correct. Those side passages would have saved lives. Well observed. The main training arena was packed with more bodies than Rachel had ever seen in one place at the academy. Students filled the lower seating sections, while instructors and senior staff occupied the raised observation platforms. She counted at least 15 different species in the crowd, their various eyes, sensors, and visual organs all focused on the center mat where she stood. Rachel wore a simple white training uniform from Earth, tied with a black belt. Her feet were bare on the padded floor. She had asked for 3 volunteer assistants and they stood nearby. Finn Cooper, her fellow human, Drex the Vortian senior student, and surprisingly, a young Crothan cadet named Vec who had specifically requested to participate. Commandant Sela's voice echoed through the arena. Cadet Moore will now demonstrate human combat techniques. All observers will remain silent during the presentation. Questions will be taken afterward. Rachel bowed, a gesture of respect from Earth martial arts. Then she stepped forward and her voice carried clearly through the arena's sound system. Combat training on Earth is built on one simple truth, she began. Humans are not the strongest species. We're not the fastest. We don't have natural weapons like claws or fangs. We can't breathe fire or generate electric shocks. So our ancestors had to become clever fighters. They had to use technique instead of raw power. She gestured to Finn, who stepped forward. Let me start with something basic. A strike. Rachel demonstrated a simple punch in slow motion, showing how her whole body contributed to the movement. Her feet planted, her hips rotated, her shoulder extended, and finally her fist shot forward. This isn't just arm strength. It's about using your entire body as one connected system. We call this kinetic linking. She had Finn hold a padded target. This time she punched at full speed. The impact made a sharp pop that echoed through the arena. Several students jumped at the sound. Now let's talk about targets, Rachel continued. She pointed to different areas on Finn's body as she spoke. Not all strikes are equal. Hitting a muscled shoulder does little. But hitting the jaw, the temple, the throat, the solar plexus, these are weak points. Humans studied anatomy for thousands of years to find where strikes work best. A Telcari instructor raised a wing arm. Rachel nodded to acknowledge the question. Do these techniques work on non-human species? The instructor asked. That's an excellent question, Rachel replied. The principles work, but the targets change. Let me demonstrate. She turned to Drex. May I use you as an example? The Vortian clicked his mandibles nervously but stepped forward. His insectoid body was very different from a human's, with a hard exoskeleton and multiple limbs. Rachel walked around him slowly. Drex has armor that my strikes can't penetrate easily. But look here. She pointed without touching to the joints where his limbs connected to his body. These are flexible points. And here, she indicated the area where his head met his thorax. This is a weak point in the exoskeleton. Every species has vulnerable areas. The key is understanding anatomy. She demonstrated a grappling technique next, showing how leverage could control an opponent regardless of strength difference. Using Finn as her partner, she showed how to use joints and balance against someone. When she took him down to the mat, she did it slowly enough that everyone could see exactly how the technique worked. This is called a joint lock, she explained while holding Finn's arm at an angle. I'm not using strength. I'm using the mechanical limits of his shoulder joint. No matter how strong he is, the joint only bends certain ways. She released Finn and helped him up. Then she looked toward the upper seating areas where the instructors sat. Her eyes found Throck. The large Crothan sat with his arms crossed, his face unreadable. Their eyes met for a moment before Rachel looked away. Now let me show something different, Rachel said. Not all Earth combat systems focus on strikes. Some are primarily defensive. She had Vec, the young Crothan volunteer, throw slow-motion punches at her. Each time his massive fist came forward, Rachel moved just enough to let it pass by her head or body. She never moved more than necessary. Her footwork was precise and economical. This is called evasion, she explained while moving. Why block a strong punch when you can simply not be where it lands? Humans learn to fight larger predators on Earth by being quick and smart rather than strong. Then she showed a redirecting technique. When Vec punched again, Rachel caught his wrist and used his own momentum to guide him past her in a circle. The large Crothan stumbled, off balance, controlled by his own forward motion. The crowd murmured with interest. Several instructors leaned forward in their seats. Rachel spent the next 20 minutes demonstrating different styles. She showed boxing with its emphasis on footwork and head movement. She demonstrated grappling, showing how to control opponents on the ground. She performed a short weapons kata, moving through forms with an imaginary blade to show how humans trained for armed combat. But combat training on Earth isn't just about fighting, Rachel said, her voice becoming more serious. It's also about discipline, respect, and knowing when not to fight. Every martial arts school I trained at taught us that fighting should be a last resort. The goal isn't to hurt people. The goal is to protect yourself and others. She paused and looked directly at where Throck sat. When Instructor Throck struck me, I didn't hit back out of anger or revenge. I defended myself with exactly enough force to end the threat. That control, that choice of how much force to use, is part of the training. It might be the most important part. Commandant Sela stood from her observation seat. Thank you, Cadet Moore. Now we will open the floor to questions and practical demonstrations. Any cadet or instructor who wishes to try these techniques may come to the mat. What happened next surprised everyone. Throck stood up. The arena went silent as the large Crothan made his way down from the upper seating. He approached the mat with heavy steps and Rachel tensed instinctively. Throck stopped at the edge of the training area. For a long moment he simply looked at Rachel. Then, slowly and deliberately, he performed a formal Crothan bow of respect, lowering his head and crossing his arms over his chest. I came to watch, Throck said, his deep voice carrying through the silent arena. I wanted to see if the strike you used was luck or skill. Now I understand. My people have fought wars for 10,000 years, but we never refined combat into an art like this. We relied on strength and aggression. You showed me that technique and knowledge can defeat raw power. He paused and something like regret crossed his alien features. I was wrong to strike you. I was wrong about human weakness. I request permission to learn from this demonstration. Rachel's eyes widened slightly. Then she bowed in return, the Earth-style bow she had shown at the beginning. Of course, Instructor. Everyone is welcome to learn. The tension in the arena broke like a snapping cable. Suddenly dozens of students were standing, moving toward the mat, calling out questions. They wanted to try the techniques. They wanted to understand how it worked. Species that had never considered formal combat training were suddenly fascinated by the idea. Rachel found herself surrounded by eager cadets. A Telkari asked about aerial combat adaptations. A Rendari wanted to know about fighting in water. 2 more Crothan cadets approached Throck and asked if he would train with them in these new techniques. Finn caught Rachel's eye from across the growing crowd and grinned. She allowed herself a small smile in return. 3 days ago she had been facing disciplinary action for knocking out an instructor. Now that same instructor was asking to learn from her. As the demonstration dissolved into an impromptu training session with volunteers trying techniques and Rachel patiently correcting their form, Commandant Sela watched from above with satisfaction. The Academy had just learned something valuable about humans. They weren't just another species to be catalogued and categorized. They were innovators who had spent millennia learning how to survive against stronger opponents. That knowledge, Sela thought, might prove very valuable in the conflicts to come. 2 months after the demonstration, Rachel stood in a newly designated training room watching 20 cadets from 8 different species work through basic striking drills. The Academy had moved quickly to implement the new program, faster than anyone expected. What started as a single demonstration had grown into something much larger. The training room had been modified to accommodate different body types. Mats of varying thickness covered the floor. Punching targets hung at multiple heights. Equipment from Earth had been shipped in at significant expense, including protective gear adapted for non-human anatomies. Rachel walked between the students, observing their form and offering quiet corrections. A Telcarry named Shira was practicing kicks, her wings folded tight against her back for balance. Her technique was improving, though she still telegraphed her movements too obviously. Shira, remember to keep your guard up, Rachel said. Your wings pull back before you kick, which tells your opponent what's coming. Try to minimize that motion. Shira adjusted her stance and tried again. This time the kick came faster, more fluid. She chirped happily at the improvement. Across the room, Vec, the young Crothan who had volunteered at the demonstration, worked with a grappling dummy. His size and strength made throws easy, but he was learning the finer points of control. He had become one of Rachel's most dedicated students, often staying after class to practice additional techniques. The door to the training room opened and Instructor Throck entered. He wore modified training clothes now instead of his usual teaching uniform. Over the past 8 weeks, he had become a regular presence in these sessions, first as an observer, then as a participant, and finally as something close to a co-instructor. Their relationship had changed in ways Rachel was still processing. The formal apology had come 3 days after the demonstration. Throck had requested a private meeting, and Rachel had gone expecting more conflict. Instead, she found a warrior struggling with the realization that his entire understanding of combat had been incomplete. I have fought in 17 campaigns, Throck had told her that day, his 4 eyes unable to meet hers. I have led troops into battle and watched good soldiers die. Some of those deaths might have been prevented if I had known what you showed us. If I had understood that strength alone is not enough. Rachel had accepted his apology, though trust took longer to rebuild. Now, watching him demonstrate a proper defensive stance to a group of struggling students, she saw someone genuinely committed to learning and teaching better methods. Cadet Moore, Throck called out, gesturing her over. Can you show them the counter to an overhead strike? They're not understanding my explanation. Rachel joined him and the small cluster of students. She demonstrated the technique slowly, showing how to step aside and redirect the incoming force. Throck watched carefully, his analytical mind cataloging every detail. You see, he said to the students, she doesn't try to stop the strike with strength. She guides it past her body and uses the momentum against the attacker. This is the human way. Efficiency over power. The students practiced the technique in pairs while Rachel and Throck supervised. It still felt strange sometimes working alongside the instructor who had struck her. But she had meant what she said during the demonstration. Combat training wasn't about holding grudges. It was about discipline and growth. Commandant Sela visited the training room that afternoon, accompanied by 2 officials from the Galactic Military Council. They observed the class silently for 20 minutes before Sela called Rachel over. Cadet Moore, the council has reviewed our new combat curriculum, Sela said, her silver-streaked mandibles clicking softly. They are impressed with the results. Student injury rates during training have decreased by 40% since we implemented human techniques. Students report better confidence and improved tactical thinking. One of the council officials, a tall being with crystalline features, spoke in a voice like chimes. Other academies are requesting information about this program. They want to implement similar training. We need instructors who can teach these methods across the galactic community. Rachel felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. Sir, I'm still a cadet myself. I'm not qualified to train instructors. Not yet, Sela agreed. But you will be. The council is proposing a new position, Galactic Combat Specialist. You would complete your cadet training, then spend 2 years traveling to different academies, teaching human combat methods to their staff. It would be an honor to Earth and a significant contribution to galactic military effectiveness. The weight of the offer settled on Rachel's shoulders. 2 years traveling between worlds, spreading knowledge that humans had developed over millennia. It was an incredible opportunity and a huge responsibility. Can I think about it, Commandant? Rachel asked. Of course, Sela replied. Take your time. The position won't be available until after your graduation anyway. After the officials left, Rachel returned to teaching. The class was working on ground fighting techniques now, something most alien species found particularly challenging. Their various body types made Earth grappling methods difficult to apply directly, but the principles still worked with modification. She was demonstrating a hold on Drex when Finn pulled her aside during a water break. Did you hear? He asked quietly. 3 more humans just enrolled for next semester. They heard about the combat program and specifically requested assignment here. We're becoming popular. Rachel smiled slightly. Funny how getting punched in the face can lead to positive changes. You handled it perfectly, Finn said seriously. You defended yourself, but you didn't let it turn into revenge. You turned an attack into an opportunity to teach. That's more impressive than the actual punch. The training session ended an hour later. Students filed out, most of them talking animatedly about the techniques they'd learned. Rachel was collecting training equipment when she noticed Vec lingering near the door. Did you need something, Vec? She asked. The young Crothan approached hesitantly. Despite his size, he managed to look nervous. Cadet Moore, I wanted to ask you something. My family is traditional Crothan warrior caste. They believe strength is everything. But I've learned so much here that contradicts that. I'm going home for break next month and I want to show them what I've learned. Would you help me prepare a demonstration? Rachel set down the equipment she was holding. You want to show your family human combat techniques? Yes, Vec said firmly. They think I'm wasting time learning from humans. They say your species is weak and has nothing to teach warriors. But they're wrong. What you've taught me has made me a better fighter and a smarter tactical thinker. I want to prove that to them. Rachel considered this carefully. She remembered Throck's initial contempt, his certainty that humans had nothing valuable to offer. She thought about how much had changed in just 2 months. All right, she agreed. We'll work on it together. But remember, the goal isn't to prove your family wrong. The goal is to show them a different perspective. Combat training is about opening minds, not closing them. Vec's eyes brightened with gratitude. Thank you, Cadet Moore. You've taught me that real strength includes knowing when to learn from others. After Vec left, Rachel found herself alone in the training room. She walked to the center of the mat and stood quietly for a moment. 2 months ago she had been a student worried about passing her classes. Now she was changing how the galaxy thought about combat and warfare. She thought about the Council's offer. Traveling between worlds, teaching at different academies, spreading knowledge that could save lives. It was exactly the kind of challenge she had come to the academy hoping to find. The door opened again. Throck entered, clearly having forgotten something. He spotted a data pad on one of the benches and retrieved it. Then he paused and looked at Rachel. You're thinking about the Council's offer, he stated. It wasn't a question. How did you know? Rachel asked. I know that look. It's the same look you had before you corrected my tactical analysis. Throck's mandibles formed what might have been a smile. You're trying to decide if speaking up is worth the risk. Rachel nodded slowly. Teaching across the galaxy is a big responsibility. Yes, Throck agreed. But you've already proven you can handle it. You taught me and I was perhaps the most stubborn student you could have faced. If you can change my mind about human capabilities, you can teach anyone. He moved toward the door then stopped. Rachel, you did something important here. You showed us that we were incomplete. That's uncomfortable knowledge, but it's necessary. The galaxy needs more people willing to challenge old assumptions. I hope you accept their offer. After he left, Rachel stood alone in the training room once more. Through the windows, she could see the stars beyond the station, countless worlds where old assumptions about strength and combat still held firm. She thought about all the Throcks out there, all the warriors who believed power was everything, all the soldiers who might die because they never learned better techniques. She thought about Vec, eager to show his family a different way. She thought about Shira improving her kicks week by week. She thought about human combat knowledge, refined over thousands of years, finally being shared with the wider galaxy. Rachel pulled out her communicator and composed a message to Commandant Sela. It was short and simple. I accept the position. When do I start? She sent the message and smiled. The galaxy was about to learn what humans had always known. True strength wasn't about raw power. It was about adaptation, technique, and the willingness to learn from anyone who had something valuable to teach. Even from a species that everyone had assumed was too weak to matter.